So welcome once again to Living in the 21st Century. Joining me today is Maksym Yali. Maksym, it's a pleasure to have you again. Bring us up to date on Ukraine affairs.
Always welcome, Errol.
Sure. So I saw you had an article recently, and this were to do with the Ukrainians are hoping that the midterm elections here in the United States doesn't swing to the Republicans. I think I understand where you're going with this, but would you care to elaborate more on it?
Yeah, surely, taking into account latest statement of ex-president Donald Trump that U.S. need to get on well with Russia because they have nuclear warheads, more than, if I'm not mistaken, 1,332 reasons to get on well with Russia, as President Trump mentioned. Besides, the leader of Republican minority in the House of Representatives, that he thinks United States need to cut off the military and financial assistance to Ukraine. Not talking about such like host of Fox News. I'm following how Fox News and other Republican sources view the situation in Ukraine, and especially the attitude to the Russian-Ukrainian war. Of course, these statements are pretty disturbing and do concern Ukrainians, because, of course, we are afraid that if Republicans win the midterms, gain the majority, at least in the Senate, which is more important than even House of Representatives, of course, we are afraid that the assistance to Ukraine will be less. Especially it concerns military assistance, especially taking into account that during last almost 2 months, we have serious successes on the battlefield in Kharkiv and Kherson region, and now especially the battle for Kherson. It's the only regional center which Russians managed to occupy during 8 months of full-fledged invasion to Ukraine. Of course, it sounds pretty disturbing to us. And of course, now we need this assistance as never. Because, of course, without US support, such like MLRS, HIMARS, artillery systems, we wouldn't have reached such good results. And of course, now when we are having, I would say, a very important period of time when we have successes and advantage in comparison with the Russians on the battlefield, in resources, etc., and we are showing it on the battlefield. Of course, such statements sound very disturbing, to put it mildly, I would say, for Ukraine. And of course, we are afraid that if Republicans gain the control, this reduction, this assistance, may be shortened.
Right.
Of course, we're also aware that not all Republicans share such opinions. And since 2014, we are having bipartisan support in American Congress, and even President Trump won the elections, no matter what he was saying concerning admitting the annexation of Crimea, etc. Then we saw that still there was no changes in US policy. But taking into account that this sounds and statements sound more and more often, of course. So we are disturbed, and we are highly concerned about that.
Well, also, I think it's very imperative that you inform the American people and its allied nations the importance of not jumping ship. Let's say even if the Republicans did get in or win the midterms election, it is very important that they continue to support Ukraine. Because if they jump ship and Putin sees that, he may be then inclined to use nuclear weapons. It also is going to incite China. They may want to go after Taiwan. With China's support and Iran's support to Russia and Belarus's support to Russia, it may come down then drastic changes and the adjustments in how you all win the war. And it may go in a negative curve opposed to positive. That can have a negative impact on the world, because if Putin, for some reason, decides to go nuclear ambitious, it's not going to just affect the Ukraine. It's going to affect surrounding nations in the Ukraine, which is other European countries, and that is going to have a negative impact on, economically speaking, on the world. There will be a shift, and believe it or not, it may very well a shift that the United States itself fall from its superiority as a leader of the free world. And very well, Russia may take that position. It may seem not realistic now, but its importance of supporting Ukraine in this war. And believe it, we are in a world war. Every nation may not be engaged in throwing about bombs and missiles and all this. The world, right now as we speak, are involved. We are in a world war, and residents from every country is feeling it some way or the other in their pockets. So I think it's vitally important too that if you can emphasize on the fact right now, the importance of the American people making sure that everything remains the way it is, I think this is a good moment for you to share that.
Thanks, Errol. You are absolutely right. Because this war, it's not about local conflict, local war. I mean, between Russia and Ukraine. It's a war between free world, headed by the United States, and autocracies. Actually, President Biden mentioned it last year in spring, after he came into power and became president of the United States, that the next conflict would be between democracies versus autocracies. Now, just today, yes, the rally of Communist Party of China has finished. Definitely, Xi Jinping is gonna be the head of China for a new term. Tomorrow he will be officially, I would say, elected, though it is obvious already. Definitely that China supports Russia, at least on diplomatic level. So far, thanks to United States and negotiations held between US and China advisors, national security advisors, etc. So far, China doesn't help financially and military to Russia. But of course, everybody, the whole world watches on Ukraine. And if Russia wins, of course, it will be defeat not only of Ukraine, but of the whole free world in general. Of course, then some states with autocratic regime would understand and would consider it as a victory. And it will be, for example, the end of non-proliferation, nuclear non-proliferation regime as well. Because as you know, Ukraine is one of the biggest contributors to this regime, because we gave third in the world nuclear potential after we gained our independence. We rejected from nuclear weapons, though we supposed and thought we had guarantees for our sovereignty and territorial integrity given by the United States, Great Britain, Russia, also joined this regime later, China and France. And then we had abolishing, I would say, of this agreement, which was a part of international law. And of course, after that, such states as North Korea looked at it, especially after Donald Trump canceled nuclear agreement with Iran. And they realized that if they get rid of nuclear weapons, they would lose their independence first. I mean, their regime. It's their safeguard, I would say. And of course, therefore, it's a battle which is going on now in Ukraine between democratic world and autocracies. And it's also clear, I hope it's getting more and more clear to the residents of the European Union and particularly citizens of the United States, that a lot depends also, not only for Ukraine, but also for the United States leadership in the world. If Ukraine loses, if we lose the assistance, military and financial, of the free world, of course, it would be almost impossible to handle and to win in this war. But if we lose, it means the whole world will lose, and the United States and the European Union. And it's obvious, like in it was in history in 1938, for example, when the prime ministers and presidents of France, Great Britain made an agreement with Hitler that they would allow Nazi Germany to annex Sudets, part of Czech Republic territories. It would bring the peace, as the Prime Minister of Great Britain at that time mentioned. But it didn't stop Hitler. Then he started the Second World War, attacking Poland. The same may be repeated this time if Ukraine loses. That time in 1939 it was Poland. This time, less than 100 years ago, it is Ukraine. So here in Ukraine now, the destiny of the future of the world is being decided, I would say. And everybody in the United States, in the free world in general, should realize that they help not only to Ukraine citizens, but they help themselves, because Putin will not stop. And China also is one of the biggest challenges if we look to the recent national security strategy published just this week in the United States. It's the biggest challenge to the United States supremacy and hegemony in the world. And of course, China, Russia, Iran would consider the defeat of Ukraine also as a defeat of the United States. That's pretty clear already, and that's, I suppose, and I hope, American citizens also starting to understand.
Great. One thing I want to ask, now, no one can get in the mind of Putin, right? The facts are clear. Ukraine is winning. You are recovering a lot of your territory that they once held. Now, it's a known fact to the world that Putin becomes desperate. He is desperate. He's losing a lot of his soldiers on the field who are not getting killed, is turning themselves in. They are retreating. He wants to recruit hundreds of thousands in Russia. They are fleeing the country. So he has turmoil now in his country. He's trying to sugarcoat it, but it's not reality. And he's desperate. He's calling on Iran buying their drones to attack Ukraine. He's in a desperate position. My concern is when someone becomes desperate and that desperate, what do you think would be his next move? And should he go to that level, what would you want to say to the United States of America? Now, I know that President Biden said that should he go nuclear, that things are going to be totally different. That's going to change the whole trajectory of the war. Do you think that Putin would bluff when he's using nuclear threats, or he would actually proceed to go nuclear?
Well, I don't think he's bluffing completely. And he undermined it in his latest statements before he made a decision to annex new territories of Ukraine. So definitely the risks of using of nukes by Russia raised significantly since then. I mean, since last month, less even after they annexed new territories. And he is now threatening to the rest of the world because, if he uses nukes, the damage it will cause not only to Ukraine, but also to Europe and some of the states and prime ministers and authorities mentioned that they would consider it as an attack not only on Ukraine, but also as on NATO in general. But at the same time, we are hoping and consider it's very important for President Biden to stay and to make a statement, clear statement, which consequences would and will Putin have if he uses nukes. It's not about sanctions. He is not afraid of them. So, of course, what we are waiting in Ukraine to clear statements that if Putin uses nukes, then there will be a strike back. Well, of course, the best variant to make for Putin clear that it will be a beginning of the third World War. Mm-hmm. Because as you know, since the end of Second World War, nobody used nukes. And it was obvious since 1970s, even since 1960s, when Caribbean crisis took place. Actually, there was just a few days ago, not anniversary, but still this data that time the United States, the USSR understood that the using of nuclear weapons will lead to the end of human civilization, because nobody can win in such war. And of course, if Putin uses nukes, as I have already mentioned, it will lead to the end of non-proliferation, nuclear non-proliferation regime, and other states such like Turkey, Israel, not talking about Iran, Saudi Arabia, and many others will consider the possession of nuclear weapons as the guarantee of their sovereignty and national security. So it's a very dangerous. And I suppose, if Putin loses this war, so far, I don't consider that the risk of using by him nukes is pretty high. Now, as you know, he's about to finish mobilization. 300,000 soldiers he mobilized, Russian citizens, though before he was constantly repeating that there will not be mobilization. We understand he lied again. He has lied many times so far already, but still he also understands the consequences. If he uses nuclear weapons, sanctions would be on another level, and it will be a risk. But still, what we are waiting for and hoping for is concrete statements how these consequences, how serious they will be for Putin's regime. Not only financial sanctions, he is not afraid of it, but also military answers. That's the most important.
Yes. With long-term missiles at this point, now, he's very low on depletion with his artillery and weaponry, etc. Do you think that it should be wise at this juncture that the United States and its allied forces, allies, issue Ukraine with long-range missiles? Do you think that may be the better way to go? You think?
Well, actually, you are absolutely right. That's what we're waiting for. To defeat Russia and to stop these missiles attacks from the territory of Russia and from the territory of Ukraine annexed previously, I mean, Crimea, exactly from that territory, they are launching drones, Iranian. We need long-range missiles, ATACMS. That's what we are asking and begging for. So they, so far, we are receiving missiles which have a range of about 80 kilometers for HIMARS. But ATACMS, that's what we're asking and needing. They have a range for 300 kilometers. And of course, if we get them, we'll have a possibility to stop this war and to defeat Putin much quicker, and to eliminate the storages and also resources, military bases, etc. What we have done already and what we keep doing, even with the help of HIMARS. They're highly effective. But of course, they also change the strategy and prefer to launch their drones and to keep storages, military storages, now on longer distance. And therefore, we need these ATACMS. Definitely. Yes. That's what we're asking and need now most of all.
Why do you think President Biden at this time is so reluctant in sending those missiles at this juncture?
Well, unfortunately, I am following all the news from the United States for many years. I'm an expert in Ukraine on the United States policy, and I see the public opinion polls as well. And actually, coming back to our topic, why we are so concerned that Republicans may win the midterms, because most of the Republican voters thinking that, okay, we're highly concerned about gas prices, inflation, and Ukraine is so long away. It doesn't concern us. For us, the most important to bring back economic stability. But as I have already mentioned, their serious consequences would be also economical, also for American citizens if Russian win this war. So at the same time, we also know that even among Democrats, there are different points of view. Even in Biden's administration, there are some specialist authorities who think, okay, we need to get along with Putin. We need to stop this war as soon as possible because ratings of President Biden falling down, and the support of President Biden. So, well, maybe we shouldn't go these weapons and as we call it, to save Putin's face. Yes, they prefer to do it, but it's wrong view. So they're hoax and doves, as we call it. Yes, in any party, in Republican, in Democratic, those who consider Russia as a threat not only to regional stability in Europe, but also to the world security in general. And these we're talking about hoax, but doves are mostly follow the isolative policy, especially it concerns Republicans, as I have mentioned, pro-Trump congressmen and Trump himself. Okay, we don't care what is going on there. The United States should consider their problems and economical stability like it was before the beginning of the First World War. Monroe Doctrine, so-called, okay, Latin America is our region, the United States and the American continent in general. What is going on in Europe, it's not so much important, but it's false. Now we are living in the global world.
Yes.
And as I have mentioned, what is taking place in Ukraine, in different parts of the world, will influence also the position of the United States.
Okay. Well, Maksym, it's a pleasure again having you on. This 30 minutes fly pretty quickly, but certainly we'll be doing this as long as it takes and keep the American people up to date as to what's going on in the Ukraine. And for all those who have been tuning in on Living in the 21st Century, have a nice day.